Hey everyone, today we're going to be making a reusable hot and cold pack. Let's get started. So in your kits, you would have received 2 pieces of fabric like I have here, an instrument for threading your needle, a sewing needle, some thread, and 5 cups of rice. Let's start by getting your needle threaded. So you have your spool of thread here. If you can't see the end of your thread, you may have to twist the little knob at the bottom here. If you give it a twist, you should see some of the thread start to come away and you can pull it free to get the end of the thread. As you can see here, my spool of thread was being a little tricky, but I promise if the thread is not coming off, if you keep twisting the knob at the bottom, it will come loose. For this project, I'm going to start with about 1/2 meter of thread, pulling it away from the spool and cutting. Now that I have my thread off my spool, I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle. Sometimes they can be hard to pick up, so I have to slide it off the table I'm working at. You're going to take your instrument you use to thread your needle, and if you can see, there's a little metal loop at the end. We're going to go ahead and place this inside the eye of the needle. You'll see it takes me a second because it can be difficult and you might have to mess around a little bit with it, but I promise it'll go through. So you'll see there my needle is on the threading device. It is not going anywhere unless I pull it off, so don't worry about it slipping off. It will stay. I'm going to go ahead and place my thread in the large loop from the threading tool. I'm only placing about 1 to 2 inches in. We're not going all the way. I'm then going to pull my needle off of the threader, pulling the thread through until it is fully through my needle. Sometimes, depending on the project you're working on, you might just need to use 1 strand of thread. What the smaller piece of thread attached would be the tail. We're going to go ahead and pull the one end so that both sides are the same length. We want 2 strands so that our piece can be strong and held together well. While I get my thread ready for this project, I'd really like to mention that I am not an expert in this field by any means. I like to sew as a hobby, and it is a passion of mine to be able to make something and be proud of it at the end and work hard to create something beautiful. You'll see here, now I have both of my ends at the same length and ready to go. What we're going to do is place a knot. So what I like to do is wrap it around my index finger 3 to 4 times, then taking my thumb, rolling it gently off of my index finger. By doing this, you are creating a knot. Just hold the end and pull the thread through, and you will have a knot. Now that we have our thread ready, we can go ahead and start with our fabric here. I'm using white fabric, while you guys, I believe, have purple, and I'm using very bright thread so that you can see the difference. I'm going to go ahead and start about 1/3 of the way down on one short side, pulling my needle through. The thread should not come through the fabric because I have a knot placed there. When we're sewing, you'll see that I've left about a 1/4 inch of space between the edge of my piece and my sewing. Doing this is called a seam allowance. We do this so that the thread does not slip through the fabric, creating holes. We're going to go back in through the fabric on the same side, about 1/2 to 1 centimeter apart from the last. You can see here I've now gone through the fabric twice. I'm always going to go back from where I came from through the fabric to the other side. Pulling my thread all the way through, you want just enough tension to keep it taut, but not to cinch the fabric. You'll see again I'm just going through the fabric again, trying my best to create a straight line. Going back through the other side. And continuing on. You'll see now that I'm getting to a corner. I want to remember that I need to keep my seam allowance on the other side as well. You should have a seam allowance of about a 1/4 inch all the way around your piece. You'll see here as I approach the corner, I'm still doing the same stitch across. I'm just moving directions. Going ahead and making sure that my fabric is still nicely together and continuing on with my stitches. You'll see here that I hit a snag in my thread. What you need to do is just pull it out through where it came, getting the knot released. What's happening here is the thread is wrapping around itself and creating a slip knot. They are super easy to get out. As you can see, I've almost made it around my whole piece of fabric, but I have run out of thread. I'm going to show you the easiest way I know to end your thread so that it doesn't fall out. Flipping over your fabric, you'll be able to see where you've come from. You see the knot at one end, and we're just going to make one at the other. What I'm doing here is placing my needle in the last stitch that I made. Place it underneath. If you end up snagging some fabric on the way in, it's all right, it's okay. Don't worry. Getting it underneath that stitch while still holding a loop at the other side may be tricky. So again, you might have to mess with it a bit. No worries. As I'm holding my loop and my needle, neither can go anywhere. What I'm going to do is place my needle through the loop, wrapping the thread around the needle several times. Again, doing this is going to create a knot, just like we did when we first put our thread on our needle. As you can see, I'm going ahead and wrapping the thread around the needle several times, probably about 3 or 4 times. Then I'm going to pull my needle through, creating a knot at the bottom. As you can see here, I'm going to go and trim that extra thread off, leaving us with a little bit of thread. So we need to thread our needle again because we did not make it all the way around our hot and cold pack. Don't be afraid here to admire your work in progress. As you can see, I'm all ready to go. I've already threaded my needle as per the instructions in the beginning, and I'm going to continue on. When we're continuing from one thread to another, I like to place my first stitch in the knot of the last one, just to have that extra stability. I'm going to continue on with our running stitch all the way to the end, leaving about 1 inch to 2 inches in the other side of the short piece. You'll see here that I've almost made it to the end. Remember, we're going to leave about 1 inch to 2 inches of space in between this stitch and the first stitches we made in the short piece of our fabric. You'll see here that I've finished and I've left about 1 inch to 1.5 inches room at the top. I'm going to end my piece of thread here, doing what I did before by placing my needle under the last stitch, holding onto the loop on the other side and wrapping it around my needle 3 to 4 times so that it is secure and in place. Pulling my needle through, that creates a knot at the end. Now that I have my knot in place, I'm just going ahead and trimming off the thread there. You can see here we've completed our stitch all the way around, leaving about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of space so that we can actually turn our project inside out. By doing this, we are hiding the seam allowances inside the hot and cold pack so that you don't see them. When you're doing this, you want to be gentle just to make sure that none of the seams pop. You'll see now that we've turned it inside out so that the seams are actually inside the piece. Doing this will hide them and make the piece look more neat. Now's the time for probably the messiest part of our project, trying to get 5 cups of rice into a small cotton hot and cold pack. What we're going to do here is a little hack I like to use. You can grab whatever size paper and roll it into a cone. You want to widen one end so we can fit as much rice into the end as possible. Placing it inside your pack about halfway through. Using this hack will help you to get more rice into the pack at an easier rate and making less of a mess. You'll see here that I'm just pouring the rice directly into the cone. You will have to lift up your pack with your cone to make sure that the rice gets to the bottom. Of course, there's going to be rice that spills out. Not a problem, don't worry. We can always pick it up and place it in the pack after. I'm going to go ahead here and get more rice, placing it into the cone, and making even more of a mess. You're going to want to continue placing rice into your pack until you are almost full. That should take the whole bag you were provided in your kit. You'll see here that I have filled my pack up with the rice. What we're going to do now is actually sew it closed. You'll see here I'm going to go ahead and sew the hole closed. What I'm going to do here is make sure that my knots are tucked in, so I don't want to see them when it's closed. What I'm going to do is place my needle actually inside the hole so that the knot at the end of my thread is not seen. As you can see, I've placed my knot inside the hole and tucked it in a bit so that you don't see it when we're finished. We're going to go ahead here and do the same stitch that we've done all the way across to close the opening. Now that we've finished with our running stitch, we're going to go back and actually do what's called a back stitch. Doing this just requires us to do the same thing we were doing, but backwards. We're going to go ahead and fill the gaps in between our stitches with new stitches, creating a closure that is secure. On my project, you will be able to see this stitch because we're doing orange on white. But on your pieces at home, they will blend in a lot better because we've matched the purple in both the fabric and the thread. We've gone ahead and finished our back stitch. Our project is almost complete. You can see on both sides mine does look kind of messy. Please remember that your stitches will blend a lot nicer than mine do. Don't worry about it being messy. We're going to go back and just end our stitch just like we have a few times before. We're going ahead and placing our needle through a stitch we've already done. Holding the loop and wrapping the loop around the needle 3 to 4 times. Going ahead with pulling our needle, this will create a knot. Going ahead now and just trimming off that excess thread. Move the rice around so that it evenly fills your pack. And there we have it, a reusable hot and cold pack. For a hot pack, I would suggest microwaving for 30 to 45 seconds. For a cold pack, you can place in the freezer for 3 hours and it's ready to go. Thanks guys, see you on the next one.